Sarah. We have back-to-back Sarahs. Sorry, I gotta click my thing out of there so I can read. Sarah's talk is going to focus on the ODOT adjacent project that she's working on that has to do with bees and the plants in the ODOT mitigation bank. And I won't give away too much. Sarah's obviously gonna get into that shortly. She's the founder and executive director of the Bee Girl organization, a grassroots nonprofit centered on bee habitat conservation through research, regeneration, and education. She's a graduate of the University of Montana's College of Forest and Conservation at the Davidson Honors College with a degree in resource conservation, focused on community collaboration and environmental policy. Sarah also served as the Kids and Bees Program Director for the American Beekeeping Federation, and to see her commitment to good policy and community collaboration realized she has also served as the president of the Northwest Farmers, get out of there, chat box, Northwest Farmers Union and Western Agricultural Society as a board member of the National Farmers Union. When she's not tirelessly working with bees, beekeepers, kids, farmers, and ranchers and policymakers, Sarah loves to read historical fiction and ride her vintage 10-speed, run in the hills and see new places, things, and people. I was excited to hear about that historical fiction. I will save my questions for the end of your talk, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to a sort of an interesting way that one of our speakers relates to plants in our basin. So I really look forward to hearing your talk. And I think we're ready for you to share your screen and get going with your slides. And thank you for everyone who's joined us tonight. I'm gonna mute myself and turn my video off and monitor the chat box. Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, yes, thank you so much for having me. So my great pleasure to come to you all tonight and talk to you a little bit about what we call is the ODOT Pollinator Monitoring Project, and it is a pollinator monitoring project at the ODOT Vernal Pool Restoration Project. And this is a whole lot of words for this slide, just ignore this. I know this is being recorded, so I left these just in case anybody wants to come back and pause it and read through a little bit more thoroughly. But so ODOT owns almost 200 acres, which is a vernal pool mitigation and conservation bank. It was historically a ranch until they bought it and started restoring it in about 2011, I believe, and have just done an amazing job. I'll talk about a little bit more why the heck ODOT would be interested in native plant and pollinator restoration in just a second. They have a few different species that the folks here would probably be interested in, as far as there's threatened and endangered plant species, and one vernal pool fairy shrimp, which is so cute, which is out there floating around in the pools. We have Lomatium cookii out there, as well as limnanthes, a woolly meadow foam that's endemic specifically to the vernal pools in this area. And so those are plants that I keep an eye on, and ODOT is doing a really good job preserving and conserving. So here's the deal. This is how ODOT has ended up managing this wetland system and native plants. So it is Oregon state law that every time ODOT removes a portion of a wetland, be that for putting in a curve in a road or putting in a new stretch of a byway or something like that, if they remove a section of sensitive wetland habitat, they have to replace it. And it wasn't working to replace it adjacent to where they had cut into it, restore it adjacent to where they had cut into it because of the weedy plant species, and everything would just take back over. So these little patchy projects wouldn't really work. So they bought this 200-acre ranch, and anytime they took a piece of wetland away, then they would replace it in this conservation bank. And it was the coolest thing to watch happen. I started partnering with ODOT in the spring of 2017 was my first year out there, and it has been absolutely amazing to watch this team and their giant land moving, super cool ODOT machines that they bring out to the system. And they've restored the hardpan layer, they've restored the swales, they've restored the pools and the highlands. And I've got some pictures to show you exactly what I'm talking about there. But and not only did they restore the structure and structural integrity of this vernal pool system, they also planted many wildflower seeds. And at first, there wasn't a lot of native bees seen on the site. And I know this is very controversial. Paul, the wetland ecologist out there, gets a lot of pushback about this. But he reached out to me and he said, you know, we've just invested a whole lot of money on all of these plant seeds, and I want to make sure that they receive pollination services. Would you be interested in bringing some beehives out to the site? And I said, absolutely. I'd love to collaborate, but also, instead of just putting them out there and hoping for the best, how about we develop a monitoring project so we can see if these honeybees are in fact beneficial to this area, or if they're having any kind of, and also watch the native bee recovery out there and see what happens over time. And he agreed. And so since 2017, I've been out there monitoring all pollinators. I do count all pollinators, but really my data is primarily focused on bees just for the sake of scope. So this amazing project is award-winning. As of last year, we received the Oregon Governor's 2020 Wetland Award, and there is no group of people that deserves it more. This crew of people, I work on a lot of habitat projects around Oregon, and hands down, this is the best team of people to possibly work with. They are so committed to this project. They're so excited about this project. Paul's an absolute dream to work with. It's so amazing to just watch the magic that can happen when you give nature a chance to recover. And when you do what you say you're going to do, and everybody lines up and gets in place and does all the things, and then watching with my own eyes over the last few years, and then also being able to see the data of the recovery of this landscape has been an absolute dream. And speaking of super rad people, I just wanted to get out my thank yous right away. So I began my career as a beekeeper, and I started as a honeybee researcher at the University of Montana in Missoula in the honeybee lab there. And then from there, I moved into commercial beekeeping a bit, and then into the nonprofit research and education world. And Bee Girl, my little organization, has been going for 10 years now. And then about 6-7 years ago, I became also extraordinarily interested in the fabulous world of native bees. And that's thanks to Dr. Robin Thorpe, who I took my first native bee course from, and he was my first mentor and was really patient with me as I was asking him a million questions and mailing him bees that I thought might be a Bombus occidentalis or a Franklin's bumblebee. It never was, but he was always so patient and such a lovely human. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but because of him that I'm in this world. Also, so many thank yous to Sam Droege from the USGS Beltsville Bee Lab, who has also been an advisor and a mentor for me for this project. And then, of course, Link Fest and the crew at the Oregon Bee Project and the Oregon Bee Atlas. And if you are interested in getting involved in knowing more about Oregon's native bees and even participating in the Atlas, I definitely recommend looking those folks up and seeing if you can't join or take a course or watch some of their YouTubes on the different things that the Oregon Bee Project and the Atlas is up to. And Link has sweetly and patiently also helped identify about approximately 2.5 billion bees that I've sent him pictures of, or he stopped by the office, so I brought up to him. So also forever thankful for that. And then it's not just me out there. I also will rope in Bee Girls staff and interns and volunteers to come out to help me collect data and sorts data back in the lab. So back to Burna Pools. So this is what this landscape, this historically vernal pool rich landscape looks like in the dry season. You wouldn't really know that there's a wetland here, a seasonal perennial wetland. You wouldn't really know that this area is, in the wet times, covered in tiny little lakes. But this is what it looks like in the wet season. So down on the right-hand side, there is a little description of exactly what a vernal pool is. So it has a hard pan layer, which keeps the water in the pools for longer. And as we head into the dry season. So, and then the highlands are in between the pools. And it's just absolutely fascinating to observe bees in this system as the highlands and then the pools all throughout the year have a completely different floral community and also a completely different pollinator community, which is so cool to see. Just maybe 2 feet uphill, a completely different bee community than you have 2 feet downhill, which is just such a interesting way to explain how complex nature is. So these vernal pools stay wet for quite some time. With climate change, this system is completely all over the place. Every single year, Paul and I just have to laugh because we feel like we're in the upside down, especially this year. Things were blooming completely out of whack, and yeah, the data was all over the place as far as bees and plants, and there was plants emerging weeks before they were supposed to emerge and weeks after they were supposed to emerge, and we were having super blooms of really weird plants, and a really interesting year to be out there. But anywho, so as these, depending upon how hot it is, how much rain we have in the wet season depends upon when these vernal pools will lose their water. And as they do, different plant dynamics, floral dynamics, different varieties will fill up the rings of the pools. And then eventually there'll be a different community of flowers that are in the bottom of the pools. It's absolutely fascinating. I think the Nature Conservancy does do some public walks out on the Whetstone Savanna, which is adjacent to the ODOT. So Whetstone Savanna belongs to the Nature Conservancy, and the ODOT project is adjacent to it. And I think the Nature Conservancy does do some public walks out there. So if you don't already have a buddy that can take you out to Whetstone Savanna, I definitely recommend it. Any time of year, it will absolutely blow your mind how beautiful it is. So here's just some shots from above. In the before times, I spent a lot of my time traveling to speak, and I got to take some pretty cool pictures from planes as I was coming and going of the project. So I just absolutely love these views because it can show how beautiful that system is once it's intact compared to the surrounding areas that were plowed and flattened for agriculture in the 1800s mostly. So it's been, this area looked like the adjoining, that middle picture, that flat waterless land closest to us. That's pretty much what the project looked like before the restoration. Not only are these beautiful vernal pools that are out there, there's also an oak savanna out there, which is so gorgeous. And I just got back from Africa, and it really does look a lot like an African savanna out there, especially in the dry season. Here's my bees that are out there when they were babies. The hives are much bigger and much older and falling apart now. But yeah, that's where they sit. We move them around every year, depending upon where the priorities are for where seeds are being planted. Then also there's prescribed burning every year out at the project. And so we make sure that the bees are not in the way of the fire. And then that photo right there on the right-hand side, that's the limnianthes, that woolly meadow foam that I was mentioning. And this is my first of maybe many controversial slides. In my observations, I have found that hands down, the most effective pollinator of this endangered plant is Apis mellifera, our honeybee. So there's one other pollinator of this plant that I have observed after years and years of sitting my butt on the ground for a very long time and watching and watching and watching. And it's a little tiny bee fly that looks like something straight out of Star Wars. And she's got this really super puffy, adorable body and very, very long legs and a super long proboscis. She's actually a cuckoo fly. She will, she shoots, she will fly over the nests of ground nesting bees actually and shoot eggs down inside ground nesting bee nests. And I am seeing more and more of these little bee flies every year, which probably means there are more and more ground nesting bees, which is awesome. But she hovers way above the flower, and sticks her super long proboscis down inside the flower just to drink the nectar. And she doesn't, I'm sure she through electric, magnetism, I'm sure some pollen will fly up and get on her, but the honeybee really does get way down in that flower and do just an exceptional job of pollinating this flower. And in areas where I have observed many honeybees, I have observed a plethora of flowers coming back the following year and years. So I can say for on this one specific flower that our honeybees are beneficial. So these are the big questions that we're asking out here with this monitoring project. Is the restoration supporting bees? Who's out there? What kind of abundance and diversity bee-wise are out there? Also looking at just observationally other pollinators. Which seed mixes are the most attractive to bees? To managed honeybees pollinate native flowers on the restoration site. And I just answered that one, but it gets a bit more complex than that. Relationship dynamics between bees. Is there a difference in the adjacent landscape? So I do have a control transect over on the TNC side as well. And then will abundance, diversity, and evenness of floral resources and bee communities change over time? So just to give you an exact view of the specific property I'm talking about, just to orient ourselves, there's the table rocks up and to the left a little bit, Central Point down and to the right a little bit. We zoom in a little bit closer. We're getting to the corner of Newland and Truax Road. And here we are. That's the property from above. And those are my observational transects. Or excuse me, those are my blue vein transects. And then I also do floral abundance, or excuse me, presence absence transects there adjacent to the blue vein trap. So blue vein trap is it looks like a jug with a weird top. And it is a super sexy looking contraption to bees. Not all bees, but many, many different species of bees. And they will fly right into that trap. And so it's a really good way to get a super big picture of what bees are out there and consistently over time is their changes. The blue vein trap, any kind of mortal trap, is not my favorite. I have been hearing of new non-mortal ways to collect bee through DNA analysis, and I am really excited for that to come out and filter down to folks like myself. I don't love having to trap bees, but at the same time, I think it is necessary for conservation, and know that there are trillions and trillions and trillions of bees on this site and the surrounding areas. And so this is one of the reasons that I love the vernal pools so much, is that you would never know what's there unless you knew what was there. This place, even in the spring from afar, it looks like a big giant empty field. That doesn't really look like there's too much going on. This is towards the end of the year, and there is just it is completely abuzz, if you will, with bees on the turkey mullein and on the trichostemma, which is pictured there. You wouldn't even know unless you knew that there were flowers all around me and bees absolutely everywhere. And I'm holding a blue vein trap in case you haven't seen one of those before. So once you get closer, it is a gorgeous world to behold. This is the bottom of a pool shortly after it had dried out. On the bottom of this pool, we have Navarisha, which is definitely a favorite. We have many different species of Navarisha on the pool, and then there's actually a little bit of Limnanthes there that's donezo for the year. And then Dalwingia yina is that purple flower that's one of my absolute favorite flowers. So many bees love it. When we have a good year, it's a really good year, and it supports so many bees, and it smells really, really good too. Here's a few other of the spring flowers that we have out on the site. Amsynchia, Collinsia. So the Collinsia grandiflora is one of my most favorite flowers that are out there. And so here's a fun story, is that I found through my monitoring that this flower is like super highly attractive to queen bumblebees. And it is one of the only things out on the property this time of year that is blooming, that seems to have a plethora of nectar and pollen to support these big giant buzzing bumblebees. And so I chatted with Paul about it, and I know that it's in the works for him to work with his region to adjust the mowing schedule in the springtime anywhere there is Collinsia, to let it bloom, let it rest until it can go to seed, to support the bumblebees that might be living along the roadsides. And driving up and down I-5, you might have noticed that at some times during the year when they're doing their mowing, they have the, oh my gosh, I'm totally, I was telling Vanessa earlier, I was like, I'm gonna forget the name of plants. Milkweed, narrowleaf milkweed. They'll put caution tape around them narrowleaf milkweed so it doesn't get mowed, so it can stay, which is really cool. So hopefully they'll be doing the same thing with Collinsia. There's our Licinia, the Oregon Sunshine, which is, it's a really interesting flower because some years the bees love it and other years the bees won't touch it with 10-foot pole. And this year it was covered in those little fuzzy bee flies. And then also Aerophyllum. Again, I'm a bee person, not totally a plant person. Oh, and my thank yous too. I definitely want to thank Paul Benton for teaching me all of these plants. And then also Molly from the Nature Conservancy has been so kind. And then Stacey Johnson from the BLM as well. I send them pictures of flowers all the time and they help me ID them. They're like my own personal like flower ID apps. Here's some summer flowers. That's Clarkie on the left. There is some more super cool, weird Navarisha, and then the popcorn flower, which is also when it's really dependent on weather. And this year, for some reason, it struggled a bit out there, but last year was an amazing year for the popcorn flower and just supported so many bees. And it was so amazing to see. It was just like a cloud of bees over the popcorn flower at all times. And then interesting thing about the Clarkia, when my first year of monitoring, it was one of the most prolific flowers, and there really wasn't that much else going on out at this site. And many different species of bees were all over it. However, as the years have progressed and there's more and more and more of other flowers, I almost never see a bee on the Clarkia anymore. So while it is I would definitely say it is a bee-friendly flower, the only time I really see bees in it is when they've been trapped by a crab spider and they're just stuck and frozen and dead inside. But they've seemed to have made the choice to move on to more attractive flowers, now that there's quite a bit of other things there. And then I also wanted to make it, or actually, no, I'll hold off on that comment. And then here's the, these are my favorite flowers out on the property, just because they are such badasses. These flowers, year after year after year, will grow, and there's more and more and more of them. They're so good at reseeding themselves. They're so strong. They will still bloom and produce nectar and pollen even on a 90-degree day, 100-degree day. They're just the absolute rock stars of supporting bees when they need it most, when it's hot and terrible out there. Under sunflower, trichostemma, and then the milkweed. So this is specifically what I do out there. So I trap bees 4 times a year. I do an intuitive square meter observation every week in the peak season. And then once it gets pretty crispy out there, July, August, September, then I just go every other week. And I just throw down a square and I get out my notebook and I record which bees I see and how many I see of them, and I associate them with the flower. And then I also do a floral presence absence adjacent to the blue vein traps. And I only have the skill set to ID bees down to genus. However, BGO just started a partnership for all of our habitat projects to send our bees to the Logan Bee Lab. And we are going to start getting them ID down to species, which is super exciting and makes our data publishable. So these are the list of bees by genus throughout the year. And so it really hasn't been that long. And then I apologize, I haven't had time to crunch our numbers from 2021 yet. So this is just the 4 previous years. All of this data has been verified by Link at the Oregon Bee Project, who's double checked all my bees. So I know for sure that this is correct. It's not just user error from me, like knowing more and more and more what I was looking at. So 2017, you can see we did see quite our more common bees, not that many of them. And then fast forward to 2020, we have all sorts of really cool bees. We've got some Ashmediella out there, which may be extraordinarily rare species. We will see when I send the bees off to get keyed down to species. And then we've got some other really cool cuckoo bees that I've been finding out there too, which is a good sign, because if there's cuckoo bees, that means that there's plenty of hosts to pick on. So I'm always excited, even though I love my bees and I don't want their babies to get eaten. It's exciting to see cuckoo bees out there, because to me, that means that there's abundance in the system. And then I just want to mention too, just a comment on rare and what is a rare bee. I mean, you can think of rare bees as what's a rare bee in the world. There are very small numbers of specific species of bees in the world, and those are really cool and really interesting. There was an osmia that was just rediscovered that was thought to be extinct. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget where it is. I think it was in South America. This giant osmia that was like this big. So that of course is a very rare bee as far as like on a world scope. And then there's rare bees for, say, the United States, like the rusty-patched bumblebee. It's very rare, endangered. for the whole US. They used to be Bombus occidentalis, the Western bumblebee, used to be all over the place. Now it's extraordinarily rare to even find one. And then there's rare for a region, and then there's rare for this project. And so we do have like the Ashmediella, and there's a few other, even Thylacopa. We do have some rare bees for this specific project. I did even find Pepinapis pruneosa, which is a squash bee. We have no gourds on the Vernal Pool project, so I have no idea what they're doing all the way over there, but it's really, really cool to see them. They're boys out looking for ladies, expanding their territory, which is really cool. It's a bee that's primarily just associated with agriculture, and it's just out cruising around looking for love. So yeah, but I'm really excited to get some of these bees down to species and see which ones are not only just rare for the project site, but maybe for the region and the state as well. So I'm going to start digging into some data, but I just wanted to give you all, in case not everybody here is a melitologist, let you kind of put a face to the name of the bees that I'm going to be talking about. So these are our more common bees out at the ODOT site. We have our bumblebee. Those are actually Dr. Robin Thorpe's fingers down at UC Davis. He did study Bombus occidentalis as well as Bombus franklinii, which is a bumblebee endemic to Ashland that probably is extinct. Melisodes and also the Eucera are long-horned bees. Those are adorable male long-horned bees. Megachilidae is our leafcutter bee. Extraordinarily, it's a common bee they love gardens because they love leaves. So it's a bee that we do see in our urban areas as well as our agricultural areas, and then as well as in the middle of absolutely nowhere. This is the Pepinapis pruneosa that I was mentioning. She looks just like a honeybee, but is orange and has a kind of squished flat abdomen. The osmia, these are some of my favorites for mason bees. So osmia can come in a variety of super cool iridescent colors. I have seen so many different color shades out there. I've seen color variations just like this, kind of like a greenish blue. I've seen super bright blue. I've seen super bright green. I have seen rusty brown. I have seen red. I've even seen purple, which is they're just the coolest bee. And they're covered in the most adorable fuzz. And then our Adrena, which there are so many species of Adrena, and they've been making their way onto the site, especially on one plant that is a very naughty plant, but man, do the Adrena love it. And that might be one of our best bets for finding a very rare bee, just because there definitely is a lot of variation in the Adrenas that I've been finding out there. So I'm excited to see what we've got. These are little teeny tiny bees that I also love so much. They do show up in traps a bit, especially the Lasioglossum, but I see them quite a bit on milkweed. They also love Docus, so wild carrot, love wild carrot. So our Lasioglossums all these bees are like the size of ants. The Lasioglossum sweaty is sage. Most of the ones that we have out at ODOT are sage green and iridescent and absolutely adorable. We find a plethora of these out there. Ceratina, which is the smaller carpenter bee, another just adorable little bee. And then the Hylaeus are a yellow-faced bee, or also called a masked bee. And they also have yellow elbows and all sorts of just really super cool variations of markings on their face. And of course, the honeybee. So here's the deal. This is my philosophy on honeybees. Honeybees are livestock. They are classified defined by the USDA as livestock. They're a livestock animal. Our native bees are wildlife. That's the difference to me. Honeybees are farm animals. Native bees are wildlife. There are many native bees, solitary bees that are around Oregon that aren't native, that actually have been imported into here. So not all solitary bees or social bees that you'll find are going to be semi-social bees. Anything that's not a honeybee that you find, you can guarantee that it belongs here. There are many, many, many bees that are around here that aren't actually from here, that do actually cause problems with the native bee communities. Just like is it a starling or like what are those jerk birds that are around here that like kick other birds out of their nests and like scare all the stellar jays away? Anyways, same sorts of problems in the bee world. And then also, yeah, there's the same sorts of problems and interactions between livestock and wildlife, just like you see on farms. However, for the most part, I believe that honeybees belong on our agricultural spaces. Unfortunately, our agricultural spaces are becoming toxic wastelands. Not just becoming, they've been toxic wastelands for quite a while. So I really do believe, and that is the thing that has to change for not only the good of bees, but the good of us and wildlife in general, other wildlife, anything, the ecosystem as a whole. I would really love to, there's a lot of tension in the groups, the honeybee group and the native bee group. I think that tension comes from scarcity and scarcity mentality. I think that all of our problems would be solved if we could change the way that we do agriculture. I am a strong believer in farming with nature, not against nature. I'm totally on the regenerative bandwagon. I believe that we can use agriculture to make our spaces, our agricultural spaces don't have to be toxic wastelands. They can be places of beauty that invite wildlife in. I believe that honeybees and native bees can coexist in a space, just like cows and deer and elk can coexist in a space. I've seen pastures that are managed really, really, really well. Cows are kept out of streams and any kind of waterways. They're rotated around the pasture in really responsible ways. There's plenty to eat for everybody. Everybody's happy and healthy. So my work is to try and help create that system for bees on our agricultural lands, because I would like to see more native bees thriving in agricultural areas, and I would like to see agricultural areas being so good and so incredibly dense with flowers and free of pesticides that beekeepers don't feel like they have to encroach into our national parks or our state parks or our BLM lands or anywhere where really it should belong to the wildlife and the native bees. So that's my soapbox. I will now put it away and move on and do a time check. Oh geez. So these are a little boring. I'm gonna just flip through them. Also, all this data is available on my website, beegirl.org/ODOT, if you wanna just kind of dig more into this. So our blue vein traps, like I said, the lasioglossum, super common out on the site. You will notice while we're on the topic of Apis mellifera versus other bees, not a lot of Apis mellifera that I'm catching out there. There's compared to and then really year after year, there does seem to be less honeybees and more of the other bees starting to emerge. These were the individuals that I observed. This is rank abundance curve over the last 3 years of who I've seen out there. So again, a lot of lasioglossum, a lot of megakylids, a lot of melisodes, especially last year, a lot of megakylids and a lot of melisodes. Osmia is another really popular one. And then honeybees are down there too. So I'm gonna start getting into the plant part. So here are this is my next controversial subject. Paul and I spent a lot of time talking about non-native plants at ODOT and the very complex relationship that they have with the other plants on site and with the bees on site, and also with climate change, and what should we be tolerant of, what should we be keeping an eye on, what should we leave, what should we take away. So it's a constant data-informed conversation that we have. So you'll notice that we've got some favorites here I've already mentioned. The Helianthus pollinators is a really popular flower. Yeah, the milkweed, super popular, popcorn flower. But if you will notice, the most popular flower as far as the amount of bees that visited it in 2020, it was pennyroyal. Is like probably I'm sure everyone is like booing right now. I know it's the bane of the existence of a lot of native plant folks and probably wetland conservation project managers. I'm not gonna lie, we've grown to love our pennyroyal a little bit out at ODOT because it supports so many bees. And really not just honeybees, it supports a wide variety of our native bees as well. And it's seeming to bring in and provide resources for a lot of Andrina. And I'm thinking, yeah, we'll see what we have as far as rare species. The Ashmediella, that rare bee, loves some pennyroyal. However, I will say this year, the climate crisis and the drought and the temperature really beat it back quite a bit. There really wasn't any mitigation that had to happen out there for it because it did okay, and then it pretty much, whereas the Helianthus kept going. This is the amount of bee genus that I have seen on every single plant. The most popular, pennyroyal, sorry. It's just what the data says, it's not me, don't take it personally. And then our popcorn flower, why can't I remember the name of this flower tonight? Milkweed. And then actually Spanish clover, which is another plant that can be knotty than our beloved bull-under sunflower, trichostemma vinegar weed, which is one of my favorites, Dowingia, which I mentioned, I just absolutely love that plant, and then so on and so forth. And then again, this data is available. And this is just kind of like the breakdown of which bees love, are associated with which plants. So yes, Apis mellifera also loves pennyroyal. Honeybees love pennyroyal. Oftentimes, non-native plants and non-native bees, especially. So pennyroyal, I think, came from Russia. Honeybees, there is a subspecies of bees that are native to Russia. So yeah, so that's always interesting, but it's just really interesting to see how many other bees appreciate. This slide is just a mess. I'm not even gonna really linger here. It was more for, it's just too small and too confusing. I'm actually working with an artist right now, a graphic designer, and we are turning this slide into an infographic. So it's going to be a lot more obvious to see these floral bee relationships. So I'll be putting that on the website and on social media here shortly. Getting to the end of the presentation. So just besides just specifically also watching bees and flowers and thinking about bees and flowers, we're also starting to really think about fire on the landscape because it's become such a prominent part of life in Southern Oregon. And so I'm starting to collect and analyze data on both the prescribed fire that is done on site. And I've also, for the last couple of years, been recording every time I go out to monitor, I record the ppm. And so I'm gonna start, I just have data on top of data on top of data with air quality. And I can correlate that to observational bee numbers. So that'll be interesting to see over time. Here's some of the other little rock stars out there. Butterflies, that's that weird little fly I was talking about. I count them too while I'm out there. There's just, besides that fly, there's not, every once in a while we do have a flush of butterflies, which is really cool. And then here's just some fun, weird pictures from the project. So the Pollinator sunflower, that flower did not take at first at all. Paul and his crew planted so much of it and it didn't take. However, the flowers that did take, because birds came and ate all the seeds is what happened. But there was a few seeds that birds probably dropped while they were stealing all these seeds. They dropped on the road and the rocks and on the road. And so a few Pollinator sunflower did come up through the rocks on the road and they were just covered in bees, these few little sunflowers, bees just like fat, it was like a siren going off. They just found them and were glommed onto them. And so I reported that to Paul, and then following years, they just like really, really, really densely planted these sunflowers to make sure they did have success. And it is just gorgeous. They're out there in late summer. There's always a Pollinator sunflower super bloom. This is a Halictidae under the scope with some super gross little mites attached to her. But these are, however, beneficial mites. They're just cleaning off something off of her fur, off of her hairs. Not all mites are bad, like the Vernal mite, which is the bane of the existence of the beekeeper. Some mites are actually beneficial. And then I just absolutely love my little Mr. and Mrs. Osmia over here. So this is a male and a female Osmia. And I just love that the female looks very feminine, has a very feminine, very cute face. And then the male has a mustache. It's so cool. I just love it. Yep, just more of that's what the helianthus looks like out there now. It's absolutely gorgeous, super climate change resilient. Trichostema, another climate change resilient flower that is an absolute badass. That's the popcorn flower I've been talking about. This beautiful purple Navarisha that I see. The Hylaeus, the yellow face bees, absolutely love this Navarisha, the purple one in particular. It's their favorite. But you have to get out there really early in the morning to see them foraging on it. We do have quite a bit of, oh, I take it back. I was misreading my Latin words. The Spanish clover is actually way down the list. I think I've only seen naked chylid on that. This is bird's-foot trefoil, which it's not a native plant, but it's not very naughty. It's really important in agriculture, especially with the kind of pastures I'm trying to get going, but it is, native bees absolutely love this flower. And then that is one swoop of the net over pennyroyal. You can see just the plethora of bees that love that plant. They're all over it. We call it bee crack. If you look really closely, you can see a teeny tiny little Hylaeus, a yellow-faced bee. Well, there's 3 or 4 of them actually on that on the yarrow. There's a super bloom off to the side there of I always want to call this one Oregon Sunshine, but it's the other one. My brain is starting to melt. I'm sure you all know what it is. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's interesting because it's the only plant that will grow in its own little spot. So there's grass, but I don't see any other flowers. We have little spots around ODOT where there's just super blooms of this plant. And then I don't see anything else blooming there any time of the year. So I wonder, one of you could tell me if it's ileopathic. Just more bees looking beautiful on flowers. Oh, I put this slide in here because that on the lower left this year, that's a wild, I'm pretty sure it's a pear tree. And my good Lord, I have never seen anything like it. It was just, it literally, there was no bees anywhere at all around this section of the property. And then I get close to this tree and it was the audible buzz and the amount of different bee species that were on it, like all these different adrenas, there was bumblebees galore. It was just absolutely amazing. I'm pretty sure it's just a pear tree that was there from the ancient homestead that was there. And it just like made me think, wow, like how cool would that be if pear growers could just, you know, like local pear growers could pay more attention to restoring native plants, native vernal pool plants, and do, I guarantee if they took out a row of pears and restored the vernal pool plants there and reduced their spraying protocol, they could halt the rental of honeybee hives and native bees would get the job done. It was just absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Just a shot there of one of the prescribed burns on the site. There, this is covering it up. Aerophyllum, that's it. Again, this is another super bloom site that nothing else I've really seen. I haven't really seen much else growing. And then I just kind of want to close on, oh, this is, so we just had our two plants of concern out there, the Lomatium cookii and the Limonanthes. We had super blooms of both of these. So that's in the top middle, that's like, it was thick with these little woolly meadow, like usually you kind of have to hunt and peck out there to find these plants, but it was like, you couldn't not step on them. They were everywhere. They were like up into the highlands even. And then it was the same for the Lomatium. I had never seen anything like it. They were just, it was such a weird year and well, like the world was falling apart. It was just so much fun to go out there to see all the success of these two endangered plants. It was really cool. And then it's not just, when you restore a landscape, it's not just about the plants and pollinators. It's been amazing over the last few years too to see the wildlife return to, it's a preserve, basically. It's a wildlife preserve for not only all these beautiful bees that we get to see, but there's a family of coyotes that are out there now. There's a golden eagle out there. There's red-tailed eagles all the time. There's a family of jackrabbits that I named the parents Peter and Petunia. I named there's one specific red-tailed hawk I recognize, his name's Frank. So spent a lot of time out there by myself. But it's just been amazing to like really watch the cascading effects of like just from restoring these, physically restoring these pools and planting these flowers, just watching nature just come back and flourish. And then I'm also going to say, this is all the same, this is I think this is my last slide, just mentioning how #it's complicated, nature is complex. When I was monitoring this year, I spent a couple of days specifically only monitoring the trichostima, the vinegar reed plant out there. And it was significant, the amount of bee species diversity, or at least bee genus diversity, that was surrounding the honeybee hives. So the honeybee hives are in just one specific part of the, and I don't have an answer for this, but I just thought it was really, really fascinating. Again, this is what the data says, don't shoot the messenger. But the trichostima, my transects near the beehives, the closer I got to the beehives, the more abundance of bees I saw, as well as the higher the bee diversity was, which was really, really interesting. And then the transects that were further away from the hives just really weren't quite buzzing. So I don't know, they all seem to like to hang out together. But it's just, that's my favorite thing about this project, is it's showing us that there is nothing that's black and white or cut and dry. We don't know it all. It's complicated, and nature is complex, and it comes down to, you know, every square meter has a different story to tell. So that's teasel there on the right hand side, also a naughty flower, but it is the lifeline for our bumblebees, our native bumblebees out there at certain times of the year. And then there's the happy little native bee snacking on some pennyroyal. Sorry. So these are our continuing questions. How will the abundance, diversity, and evenness of bees continue to change over time? Will the native bee population be affected when managed honeybee heads are moved or removed? Which, yes, it is changed when they're moved. I do, and not just the trichostemma, I also have seen more bees around those hives. I've also watched bumblebees follow honeybees out to forage. They sit there at the bottom of the hives and they'll watch, and then they'll go follow them. It's really cool. Will forb abundance and diversity change over time? We're totally seeing that, which is really interesting. How will prescribed burns affect plant and pollinator populations? I do have a lot of data on this. I'm excited to dig into. Will the flowering native plants be able to survive the invasive weedy plants? I would say the greatest threat to native bees on this property is the weedy plants. Ugh, they're just a nightmare. This one grass in particular. Are there rare pollinator species out there? And then what flowers support those rare or specialist species? And then also, I think that we need to be thinking about climate change and everything that we do. And luckily, I run a small nonprofit, and we have no laws or rules or hush orders when it comes to talking about climate change. So I think we need to be talking about it and looking at it and surveying it, and then we need to be sharing what we find with the public. And if it's a cause for alarm, it's a cause for alarm. So yeah. So thank you so much for having me. That's my contact information. I'm super, especially in the season, I post a ton of pictures of flowers, native flowers and bees, and tell a lot of stories about what I'm out there seeing at ODOT. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm happy to stick around to answer questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh, I can hear my voice echoing, sorry. I'm just going to read through some of the comments and questions that we got. Thank you again for your talk. Thanks for joining us and putting this talk together. I guess before we get too much into the questions, for folks who were at the last meeting, we did announce our species that the Siskiyou chapter will be sponsoring for the 3rd volume of the Oregon Flora. It's the split hair paintbrush, the Siskiyou willow herb, the Waldo gentian, Henderson's orchilea, and Heinz's walnut. These are all really great plants. They're from our region. They're super special, and you can look them up if you are interested in learning more about some super exceptional plants from our region. So just for our questions, and then Christy again commented that there will be some spring hikes at the Whetstone Savanna Preserve this year, so stay tuned. And PSO, just like Sarah, recognizes the value of that preserve, and it's really great to hear all of the background information you provided, Sarah, and all of that like context and appreciation for vernal pools, which is a really undervalued habitat type that needs preservation. Sure. Yeah, so hopefully we'll get some folks out there. If anyone on this talk is interested in that, they can reach out to you.
Yeah, I overheard a rancher that lives nearby actually had a beekeeping meeting saying that they like threw horse shit in their vernal pools because they don't want to like have a endangered species discovered on their property and then have the government tell them what to do. And I would just encourage no one to do that.
Well, yeah,
I don't think we're gonna have to like worry about anyone in this crowd, but like I go into agricultural spaces, into local ranching spaces, and I just try and nerd out on vernal pools as much as possible, and just say, you know, like these are actually like really super cool natural systems. And if you do have bees, or I don't know, I just think that they're very misunderstood and underappreciated.
Yeah, and I think the laws around endangered plants is also in that instance possibly misunderstood. Anyways,
yeah.
Okay, so the first question we have from Christy is, how are you able to determine that honeybees are effective pollinators of the large flower woody meadow foam? Visiting the flowers or carrying pollen doesn't necessarily equal pollination. This species has been documented, at least for partially self-fertilizing. The commercially grown meadow foam for oil, Linanthes alba, is documented as being pollinated by honeybees as well as native bees. Thank you for your distinguishing the farming non-native bees and the wild. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point, just distinguishing the difference between something being used for agricultural purposes versus something that's categorized as wildlife. But I think what she's asking is sort of, how do you determine a causal relationship between the honeybee pollination in this particular instance?
Yeah, I mean, it's just anecdotal. I don't have like DNA data to show that like a honeybee brought pollen from flower A to flower B. It's just anecdotal from sitting there and watching. Honeybees do pack pollen into their pollen baskets, but before they do that, they are just absolutely covered in it. And so being able to see them physically just move pollen from flower to flower to flower to flower, and then those spots, those different observational transects, where I have seen, because sometimes I won't see any bees, and then sometimes I do observe quite a few, because honeybees will follow each other to a resource. Scout bees go back to the hive, they do a waggle dance, and they bring another team out with them. And so these areas where I've seen lots of honeybees, the areas the following year or years do seem to be more prolific with that plant. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I also work in vineyards, and wine grapes are self-pollinating, but bees will visit wine grapes as well. So, and there's different flowers like citrus that are self-pollinating, but if you do have bees present, you will get increased yield. So, but yeah,
well,
it's not, I don't have the data, it's just anecdotal.
Yeah, the mention of sort of like the DNA component or the eDNA techniques. I'm curious.
eDNA, that's it.
Yeah, I'm curious if you talk to anyone who's doing eDNA work in the region. I think, their last name is Everett, the person working on that in this region. Anyway, that's a great technique that I think will become more readily available to practitioners in this area of research.
The buzz. I was at a native pollinator monitoring symposium last week, and that's what everyone was talking about. So I think it's coming.
Cool. Yeah, I think that will be really helpful in establishing causal relationships between pollination, because it is tricky. There are certain violas I've been reading about in our region that maybe host the silver spot, and there's definitely violas that occur in that preserve in the Nature Conservancy side that nobody knows if they're getting pollinated, because they're known to have like a sterile flower that produces a floral resource, but it definitely clones itself. So it's hard to pinpoint that relationship. I'm going to skip my question for just a second, because we only have a couple minutes of Q&A, and then we won't keep everyone on the line too long. But Barb Settles asks, can you describe the controlled burns on the ODOT project?
Oh yeah, so it's done like hand in hand. It's like a win-win. So ODOT will partner with other state agencies that need fire training. For basically, they just go out and they do trainings on doing prescribed and controlled burns for fire lines, and then they use the property to do that. And so we don't let them use, not we, ODOT, the bosses don't let them use any chemicals. They can only use water. So they go out there with floozies. I watched it for like half a day last year. It was really cool. So they go out with so the idea is every single inch of land at the ODOT site will be burned every 5 years. And that is 5-ish years. And that's the natural fire cycle, most likely, for this region in particular. And then also, it's used primarily just to beat back the invasives, especially the grasses that are coming. And then it also just seems to, and just the little bits of data I've been picking through, it really does seem to increase for blooms post prescribed burn. So and then it's only like, it doesn't even touch the soil. It's like they barely get it going and they put it out. And so it doesn't affect like any native bees that would be any nesting in the soil at all. So yeah, they start the fire with fusees, they let it burn for a few minutes, and then they run out and put it out with water. And then, yeah, so that's the physical process of how they do it. And then it just rotates every year. Like Paul just has an area that he wants burned, and then he just gives the parameters, and then they move around. So
do you know if there is any monitoring going on about the efficacy of that?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a Paul question. I don't know. I would hope that there would be. And so I took a fire course, a fire resiliency for farmer courses, and then we took a workshop from the Yurok tribe, and they talked about like good timing for fires and like oak savannas, and it's actually December is the best time to burn, according to the Yurok tribe. And I brought that up to Paul, but he was like, yeah, we've actually kind of thought about that, but everybody takes off time for Christmas. And so it's impossible, and around the holidays and in December and that whole, like, that's when everybody takes off time. So, and that's also like firefighters aren't like geared up and ready to do their thing in the middle of winter. They're like driving snowplows. So that's really unfortunate, because I would, especially for the oak understory, it sounded like it was extraordinarily beneficial for the leaves to get a quick burn in the wintertime.
Ooh, sort of in response to your question, Tula has posted a link to the Oak Savanna report. So I think Paul and Keith received sort of like a sort of recognition, sort of certification of the bank. And there's some great reports on the project so far. It has been, as you described so well, it has been really successful in the plant component. I know there's some struggles in the sort of mound upland areas, but generally speaking, like this project's sort of an exception to the quality of mitigation banks and wetland restoration. And so, yeah, I would second reading that report.
Yeah, that report it's probably the same report. I've also posted it on my website, beegirl.org/ODOT. There's a link to it. It's like a 26-page full color report, super gorgeous.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess I'll also go back to my question. I was curious if you have thought about sort of decoupling the impact of a plant like Mentha peluja being invasive, so it has this high % cover over a site. So there's sort of this inherent impact in the extensive cover of that plant, meaning that it just has a higher likelihood of being visited by bees. And because it's a generalist plant, it's likely visited by generalist pollinator species. And is there any way to kind of like account for that variance or decouple that impact in
yeah, that's a really good question. And I actually did like a very light percentage survey for how much percentage of the 200 acres the Mentha actually is taking over of the project, and then like down in the vernal pools, and where is it and how much is there. And there's really not that much there. I think that's why we're not super worried about it at this point. And it was really interesting because I went out to Immigrant Lake / Immigrant Field to walk my dog a couple weeks ago. And the whole entire freaking thing is Mentha. And I was like, oh, this is why people hate this flower. Like, it is, the whole bottom of the lake is just Mentha. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, it did what it does. But it's not really spreading as fast as you would think that plant would. And like I said, it kind of got going this year and then it all died. It got too hot and it croaks.
Right.
Nature kind of took care of it this year. And then the other plants did okay. So So whatever kind of natural balance we're able to strike out there, it seems to be kind of like kept at bay-ish. I mean, it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's taking over by any means.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, yeah, calculating the percent cover and sort of like, yeah, that seems like a reasonable way. I don't know.
Yeah, because I was really curious about that too. I was like, is it like, is it really taking? So I took out my square and I flipped my square all over the place. And then I looked at like Google Earth, and then I also have a GPS, and I marked a few things and kind of did some math. And I was like, oh, wow, it's like 3%. Like, it's really not. And then there's other nearby flushes of flowers that are even bigger. So yeah.
Cool. I like the use of, so I always fantasize about going to see a super bloom in California. It's peak season for botanical survey, so I've never gotten to go see one, and I'm going to tell myself that there's one in September with helianthus, because that's when I can go see one.
It's so cool. Like, it just makes me so happy. I'll be so grumpy and the wildfires are raging, and it like makes it, I'm like, don't feel good. And and every day that I get to go to ODOT and that time of year, it just makes me so happy, because there's just like these giant fields, just pools, whole pools filled with helianthus, just covered in bees.
And it's like the one for the basin. It's endemic, special. I guess those are sort of the tail end of the questions. And if folks have any more, speak now or forever email Sarah. At bgirl.org. Christy says, can you lead a hike for NPSO during the helianthus bloom?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, if it's okay with Paul, we have to ask him, but I would love it. Yeah, we can get out some nets and some little bee containers and go do some monitoring. You guys can come to work with me. That'd be so fun.
I want to see a super bloom in Southern Oregon.
And I guess to me, like, I mean, it's nothing like the like California poppy super blooms.
That's not what I'm going to tell myself.
Yeah. To me,
I want to protect.
Loving this flower so much in the first year, it was like 4 of them just like coming out of the rocks. And so knowing that's how we started and now where we're at, it's just so rad. There's actually a video. I have if you look like towards the end of the summer on Instagram, there's like a video of me like talking about my feelings and walking through a helianthus bloom.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really interesting perspective on the work that you do and how honeybees interact with like our local ecology. And I really, again, appreciate your framework and how you're researching this interaction. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It was great. Very interesting.
Thanks for having me.